Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Darshan Talks. I'm your host, Darshan Kulkarni. It's my mission to help you trust the products you depend on. As you may know, I'm an attorney, I'm a pharmacist, and I advise companies with FDA regulated products. So if you think about drugs, wonder about devices, or obsess over pharmacy, this is the podcast for you. I do have to also always specify I am an attorney, but I'm not your attorney. I am a pharmacist, but I'm not your pharmacist. So this is neither legal advice nor clinical advice. I do these live streams because they're a lot of fun, and I find myself learning something new from guests like the one I have today every single time. But it would be nice to know if someone's actually listening. So if you like what you hear, please leave a comment, please subscribe. Please ask questions while we're having this discussion. Please leave questions if you like, and just tag Robin or myself, and we'd be happy to get back to you with answers. Or if you just like the whole discussion itself, please share it, and we'd love to sort of reach back out to you. Today's podcast. Also, if you want to reach me, you can find me on Twitter at Darshan Talks, or just go to our website at darshantalks.com. Today's live stream is about, hopefully, we have a lot of plans about what today's live stream is going to be about, but hopefully it's going to end up being about client management. And I think that's a really interesting conversation because they always say things like under promise and over deliver and all of those good things. But what happens in a world where the client expects the world and sometimes that's just impossible? So how do you meet client expectations, reach out to clients in a way that gets them to where they need to be in a way that's compliant, especially in a heavily regulated world like the FDA world? So if you engage with contractors, if you engage with medical writers specifically, if you have questions about client management on either side of the story, please be part of this. Please reach out. And it's going to be a really, really fun conversation. I do want to point out that our guest for today is the founder and president of Whitsell Innovations, Inc. I do want to clarify, it is not Whitsell Solutions because I got that wrong about 3 to 5 minutes ago.
Darshan, come on now.
Considering the number of times I've had you on and how long I've known you, you would think I'd get that right, but I suck.
I'll cut you some slack.
Cut me some slack. Thank you. But I'm really excited to have her on. We've had her on before, and she's always charming, always super, super smart, and always makes me feel like I learned a little bit more from her every single time. So our guest for today, Robin Whitsell. Hey, Robin.
Darshan, how you doing?
I have been good, busy, but not going to complain too much. And from what I gather, talking to the people on the podcast, on the live stream, everyone's super busy, which I think is fascinating. Has that been your case?
Par for the course for our industry. You hit Q3, Q4, and like the wheels come off the bus. So.
Well, they have to spend all their money, right, before the end of the year.
I think everybody likes to give the FDA a Hanukkah gift or a Christmas gift, and it's out for the rest of the year. And I'm sure that the FDA is on to that.
I think they've figured that part out. Which actually raises the question: how has COVID been for you?
Busy. I mean, clearly, our industry has had to pivot a lot. I mean, had to figure out new things, had to figure out working from home, had to figure out how to keep patients safe. And I think it's not going to get any easier with the Delta variant. But there still is a need for the development of new therapeutics for patients. Cancer doesn't go away because you have a pandemic. So yeah, we've been busy as we're trying to accommodate the demands of our industry and deliver the best we can.
Which I think is a really interesting comment you made, which is cancer doesn't go away just because there's COVID, except, as you know, people have been going less and less in for treatment for cancer and for a lot of the other therapies, and they're expecting that rebound effect from the fact that no one went in during COVID, or at least whatever you want to call the original wave of COVID, and now they're all coming in and they're going, we've missed a lot of people, and now they're coming in with more advanced diagnoses because they just didn't get treated during that time. But speaking of that part of the story, has that also impacted the type of work you're doing? In that, people who said, let me figure out what I need to do, let me see if I can sort of restabilize myself, are they now coming back with greater force, with greater sort of interest right now that they just held off on last year?
I'm not exactly sure. I mean, I think we've seen adjustments with specific clinical trial protocols, things like that, trying to accommodate. I've seen where the data have been impacted by some of those delays in getting treatment, but I don't have a broad enough viewpoint of the entire medical industry to know for sure.
So let's talk a little bit about these people. When I say these people, potential customers, potential clients
Mhm.
coming to you. My question for you is, um, these clients often are now going, I have certain expectations, I have to meet certain timelines. How do you now coach them through, look, I can help you with these timelines, but these are the actual facts. Do you find yourself coaching these potential clients, or do they come in and they're doing RFPs and everyone's coming in saying either you do this or you can't?
So we have kind of a whole range of size of clients. So some of our clients are sort of mid-size or smaller pharma. In that case, they're not necessarily doing RFPs. But they will come to us and say, hey, we really need help with this NDA submission, or we really need help with this IND. I'm sorry, I'll stop talking in acronyms. We need help with this new drug application or this investigational new drug application so that we can do our first in human studies. They'll come in and say that. And then I'll take a look at the timeline that they're proposing. And there's specific questions you ask, right? Like you ask questions about, so when are you expecting these data? Or when are you expecting your last patient last visit? Or have you finished all of the good laboratory practice non-clinical studies that you need in order to do an investigational new drug application to launch your first in humans protocol? We'll ask those kind of questions, and invariably they haven't. So we're like, well, yeah, so there are prerequisites that you're going to need to get to the finish line you want to get to. And sometimes we'll have the client will have somebody who's like a project manager, and they've got this lovely Gantt chart, but it's not founded in reality. It's like I see that you're getting your data here, and 3 weeks later you want to submit to the FDA. I'm not sure how that's going to work when you have 7 or 8 unique documents you have to design to, or you have to write and actually have strategy around and understand to be able to get there. So those are some of the conversations we've been having. And I think there's a part of it where, like, if I'm an honest player, I have to say that to you. I'm not going to lie to you to get your business, right? But the other piece is I have to communicate risk to you. There's risk to an accelerated timeline that doesn't make sense for your team. And if I'm not upfront about that, then I'm not doing you any favors. And if someone doesn't pick our company because of that, I think we're probably better off.
Which really raises that question, right? Because as you start getting into this world where you're talking about managing expectations, um, what strategies have you over time developed around engaging and educating? Because as you mentioned, there are some people who come in with a vast amount of knowledge around operationalizing things, but they don't understand the industry. And they come in saying, look, I know how to run a Six Sigma team and I know how to be lean. And we're trying to do all these different things. And then you're going, that's all great, but none of that ties to the reality of what I have to work with. So you obviously need to have a conversation, but how do you have that conversation without making them, who might be at a director or a VP level, not feel like you're either talking down to them or they just don't feel like you're respecting their role and their position?
It's a challenging balancing act for sure. I think being able to set a framework around risk is an important one. So, or a framework around expectations. Like this is what the agency expectations look like, and we want to make sure you're going to put your best face forward for the agency. And if you don't have these components, it's hard to do so. So I think those are the initial strategies that we take on, or I personally take on.
So your strategy is really explaining the risk to them.
Mhm.
And if they understand the risk, hopefully what that means is that they will understand that it's in their best interest to listen to you. Um,
I think we'd all do things better if we did them my way. I tell my kids that all the time.
how does that work out for you with your kids?
Not at all. Not at all.
So is it any better at the VP level?
Yeah, right. I'd rather face the VP level than my kids for that kind of stuff. No, I'm kidding though. But I think for the most part, there can be sort of an aspirational thing, like, oh, we could do this. Even with some of our existing clients, it's like, I understand this is what you want. There needs to be a massive change in your organization for you to get there. This is how your organization is structured. And I think I'm not telling them anything they don't know. Um, in some cases, I've had where people say, "Hey, can you put that in an email?" Because they want to be able to say, like, we talked to this outside person, and this is what
Yeah.
she said, and I get it. Like, I get it. That's like it's it's not a bad strategy if someone's trying to manage expectations internally. I think there are times when they know it's not really feasible, and they're kind of wondering, is there any kind of magic out there? And no, I mean, I wish there were, but there's not.
In
Um,
that case, are you often guiding them into basically getting another team or a external team to help them first right their ship before directing their ship? And in that case, how do they come to you and go, look, apparently what you're telling me is this needs to be fixed before you can come in and do your role. I don't Correct me if I'm wrong, Robin, but I don't think Whitsell Innovations is in quality management. I could be wrong. I really am. Is that accurate?
no, we're not doing quality
Okay,
management. No.
you're not. So if that's true, do you find yourself basically then pointing them towards another team who might be able to help with that?
Sometimes, I mean, sometimes I'll say to them, what you need is something like X, or have you talked to someone like Y?
Okay.
Sometimes it's folks who have deeper insights into regulatory strategy within a specific division. Like,
Yeah.
each division of FDA is sort of like their own little family, and they have their own kind of unspoken rules and the spoken rules. And I
Yeah.
think it's important to understand that when a company is interacting with the agency, yes, there are meetings and they're predominantly Zoom now. And but really it's the proofs in the pudding with the documentation you provide them. Are
Yeah.
you telling the story? Are you giving them the nonfiction story they need to understand the safety and efficacy of your compound? Because it's going to be put in a person. Or if you're in the veterinary group, it's going to be put in an animal. So you have to be able to create that story and be able to stand behind it.
Right.
And I think there's especially for some of the smaller companies, they've made promises. They've said, "Oh, we're going to get this in before the end of the year," and they may not have the data to do so. They and so then or we've created a corporate goal around this, and it's like, well, um, you know, uh, you don't have what you don't right now have what you need, but we can talk about how to plan backwards, how to look at when you'll have those deliverables, and maximize the time that you can right now that you don't have them, so that when you do have them, you're prepared and you can move quickly and efficiently. And that's what the best you can do. I think, and there are times when that's actually, I think, why they come to us is to have that conversation.
So it's interesting what you're talking about in many ways is where the company itself is split up into two teams. The team that believes that something's possible and the team that believes that something's impossible or unlikely. And you are now often put in the position of playing arbitrator or mediator between these two opposing goals. Um,
Yeah. I mean, I sometimes, yes. I think we have that situation. Another situation that sort of seems to pop up is we will have, even on a specific document, conflict between team members on that document. And, uh, we're trying to walk them through the concept of that getting the document right is more important than being right. And that's a very sensitive topic. Because I think sometimes folks are very focused on where they're coming from, and they're not really looking across what that purpose of that document is. So it definitely is a struggle, and it puts us in an odd position because we don't truly have authority over this person. We're consultants or an
Yeah.
outside team coming in to help. I bet you face that a lot.
I faced that a fair bit, and I think the way I approach that problem when someone says that they want to do this a specific way, I first sort of start with the mentality there's more than one way to skin the cat, and maybe they have a thought process I haven't considered yet, and that what I have in mind may not necessarily be the only answer that's right for them. So what I often start with is, why do you think what you're saying is the right way? Okay, explain that to me. Then they might say XYZ reasons. Then you start poking holes at it and you go, does that make sense in light of this guidance, in light of this expectation, in light of this? That's when they start cracking a little bit and they go, well, and you're asking them with, you're often confident because you've done this more than a few times. And then you go, look, I totally understand that you have this way of doing things, and we might be able to fit a square peg into a round hole. But is that really where you want to be? Because in the end, you're looking for X result. And if we're looking for X result, fitting that square peg into that round hole is more unlikely to give you the result you want than we doing what we've done 50 times before, which results in a more predictable outcome. Um,
Yeah, a little. I mean, so I mean,
you've done it a different way. What's your
well, I mean,
understanding?
I think there's always opinion, right? Opinion is
Mm-hmm.
everyone has an opinion, and then there's regulation or guidance. So it's not that Robin Whitsell is saying, "Hey, you can't do a first in human study because you don't have your good laboratory practice toxicology studies done." It's not
Right.
Robin saying that; it's the FDA. So,
Right.
and there's nothing. My opinion about it can, even if you've done many of your non-clinical studies, they aren't done according to good laboratory practice. They don't count in the
They don't
same
count.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I don't mean they're not valuable in terms of learning something. I'm not saying they're not valuable in terms of how you've characterized this or proof of concept or something you're doing is novel and interesting and potentially a breakthrough for the patients that you want to help. I'm saying that the FDA has very specific um, requirements and they're there for a reason. Um, I think I mean, coming back to sort of the vaccines for COVID, right? They weren't allowed to jump through any hoops. They had to do the studies. They had to provide the data. They had to demonstrate safety and efficacy like anything else. And it's good that we have those rules in place because if the last year has taught us nothing, that would have been an opportunity to skip the rules, and they didn't. And we're probably all better off for it. So I'm I'm not trying to couch it in terms of, hey, we're doing it the way we've always done it. That is not at all what I think of as a best practice. I think the best practice is if I'm reading the guidance, interpreting the guidance correctly, here's what you need, and here's what you have, and then we can start talking about how do you bridge that gap.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're often finding yourself in a position where you are explaining what you consider to be the ideal place you want to be compared to what they would consider to be the ideal place they want to be. But you pointed out something that is often a problem, which is you're not the asset holder. You are not the decision maker. You are a consultant expert. Do you find pushback in the teams, or is it generally speaking one or two stakeholders who are often very important, but they're the ones pushing back and they just have an inordinate amount of influence?
Um, it kind of all of the above. It can be any of that, but I think something that's important is that I recognize that the people that are coming to us, they, especially if it's a new client, they have so much more exposure to this therapeutic, to this patient population, to the needs of that patient population, to what a promising druggable target will look like. they know more than I do, and I try to honor that expertise. And what I'm trying to say to them is, hey, yes, you are that expert there. Um, this is what this guidance says. If you've had different conversations with the agency, by all means, let me know because we will accommodate what you've negotiated with them. I mean, so I think there's an opportunity to make sure that we're not, trying to um, make them feel patronized or talked down to. I think that, I mean, we're around for a collaboration, a partnership. And if that's not what they want, we're probably not the right company for them. And that's okay. I mean, uh, you know, there's a lot of companies out there. Well, there's a handful that do what we do, and maybe one of the other ones is better. But I, 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 um, I don't think I'd be able to kind of sleep at night if I were telling people something that's not true.
Right.
Um, just not who I am. I'm not, I'm not a great deceiver. Let's put it that way. Manipulation, not my strong suit, but
Well, I think the FDA appreciates that probably. Uh,
let's hope.
but so let's ask that question. I'm actually looking at your website, as you can tell, and one of the things that's really jumping out at me, and again, this might be a limitation of what websites can do, which is they can only tell one part of the story. In the end, you've got to have a discussion. But I guess one of my questions is, I'm seeing a lot of this stuff on here. One of the things I'm not seeing is engagement with the FDA in terms of the different meetings that you might have. Do you also tend to help prepare for those meetings and write out the questions and sort of justify the answers? Or do you see that as something that's usually done by the company? And the reason I'm asking that question is tying that into the conflicts that are occurring in the background as you're formulating the response.
So there are different aspects, and I'll kind of chunk those apart. So there's the
Yeah,
actual meeting with the FDA, right?
yeah,
And we don't traditionally attend that, though I think that would be fun to do so. I
yeah,
have in the past, in my past life. Um, and then there's this piece of when you request a meeting with the FDA, there's a requirement that you send them uh, materials in advance. And the materials that you owe them, there's a very specific time limit between the time that you're requesting it and you have to send the stuff and when you get the meeting. So it's at that point of requesting the meeting, it's a good idea to know the questions you want to ask them. So
yeah.
we do work on that. We work with them on, okay, have you been what are the gaps that you need to fill? What are the questions that you have? What are the things that could stop you from moving forward? And there are specified meetings around different time windows. So if you're planning on doing your first in human study, and you're going to file your investigational new drug application, you'll do a pre-IND meeting where you're going to go and talk to the agency. And that's the opportunity for the company to figure out what the path is to get to their yes. It's their opportunity to say, this is what we're doing, this is our plan, this is the patient population we're interested in. They can map out those different pieces and ask those questions. So then when they do go to filing their IND, they're more likely to get to, yeah, go ahead, try your first in human study. I think this is promising, as opposed to, slow down, we got to talk. So that's something we work on a lot. And I think there's different strategies around how to write those, but I generally say start with the questions and then put your brain in the space of the regulator. When they read the question, what are they going to think? Like, how
Right.
do you want to walk them through? So you always answer the question. You always ask the question in a way that you want the answer to be yes, right? Like,
Yeah.
does the agency think that? But you need to provide them those ideas. Like, okay, we've done this, we looked at this, the research says this, and it lands them at your yes, hopefully, when you're done with the answer.
Um, this is a question that's coming to me from my so I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this question
Uh oh.
properly. Um, because there are two schools of thought I have. And we're slightly diverting from the questions we were having on just customer engagement. And we're talking a little bit about regulatory engagement as we start talking about this. So, as you know, I teach at the University of the Sciences, where I teach in the biomedical writing program. So anyone who's from U Sciences, yeah, hi.
Your own
Uh,
fan club, built-in fan club.
exactly, right? Built-in fan club. Uh, One of the big things they talk about is the IMRAD method of writing. Have you heard of it before?
Repeat in
IMRAD. It's basically the format they follow
Oh, okay.
to have a appropriate write up for the agency, and they have a whole thing. And I'm sure we can. Yeah, I'll send that for you. Absolutely. On the other hand, one of the things I tend to do, and this is where my students sort of struggle, is I make them go down the IRAC format, which is what lawyers use to push a point.
Okay.
The issue, rule, analysis, conclusion.
Oh, wait. You're using acronyms on me? Come on now. All right. Say it again. I'm going to write it down.
So the one I use is called IRAC, IRAC.
Okay.
Issue, rule, analysis, conclusion. The one that's IMRAD, and now that we're talking about this, I'm going to try to see if I can remember what it stands for. IMRAD format. It stands for introduction, method, results, discussion, conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
So the question I have is, when you're engaging with the agency, you're trying to convince them of a specific viewpoint. Have you found the IMRAD format to be the best way to get there? Or do you think a more, I love that where I can already see your answer going, no. Or do you think like a legal format where the entire job is convincing is a better format, or both of those are wrong and there's a better way to do it?
Well, I mean, if I'm looking at IMRAD, this is a manuscript to me, right? This is how you would approach a manuscript. Yeah. And it's and rarely in regulatory writing are you truly writing a manuscript, right? It's not necessarily. I mean, there are certain documents where there is the telling of the story, where there is going to be, hey, you've got to introduce it, you've got to provide a little bit of background.
Yeah.
You need to provide rationale for why you're doing this. But I don't think that's necessarily, when you're talking to a regulator, the best approach. I mean, let's start with, unless what you're doing is the cuttingest of cutting edge, they've probably seen or heard something like it. And they know more than we do, like, right? They look at every company, especially when you think about how specialized the divisions are. They see the things that have come in. So even some of the novel cell therapies right now, they've looked at other novel cell therapies. So if you're introducing them to this concept, you're telling them something they already know, and it's sort of a waste of real estate. So instead, I think it's about, really, I mean, any writing should be, who's your audience? What does the audience think? How are you going to bring the audience to what you need them to know? So start with this idea of your audience is pretty sophisticated. So if you do want to introduce your topic, it can be lightly done. And then you can get really into the kinds of questions they might have, and perhaps even what their initial objection might be. And maybe that's what you mean by rule, analysis, conclusion. Like, you're thinking about, in their minds, they might be questioning why we're doing X. Okay, well then just say out loud, why are you doing X?
Yeah. So, as you know, we usually aim for about 15, 20 minutes. We're already at 28 minutes. Well, 29.
We never keep it to 15 minutes, but I think we
never
can
do.
30.
But I always aim for it. I have this imaginary aim that I'm going to have a really tight podcast today. I never ever get there, but it's always that goal. But as always, you are fascinating. It was amazing having you on. Just want to sort of clarify for everyone, you can always go to our website at whitsellinnovations.com, not Whitsell Solutions, Whitsell Innovations. I really hope there's someone called Whitsell Solutions going, no, feel free to pitch it. But whitsellinnovations.com. You can also reach her on Twitter at Robin Whitsell, and she is a prolific tweeter, so you can find her. I've had many discussions with her. In fact, is that how we first talked, Robin?
Might be.
Might be the early days of Twitter.
Might be. That might have been. Remember. Yeah. I don't remember, but that could have been.
And then there's LinkedIn, where you can find her as well.
I just ask, if you reach out to me on LinkedIn, tell me who you are, because I get a lot of random LinkedIn requests. So you're much better off if you send me a note.
One of my favorite ones on LinkedIn was, I had this barber from Indonesia reach out to me. I still don't, to this day, I have no idea why this person. But it was literally like I looked at their profile. I just said barber. I'm like, come on. Like, if you were like a Philly barber, maybe I'll like bite. But this is really unlikely here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
So what you're saying is don't be a Philly barber or an Indonesian barber if we're
no, you
people
can
are
be a
trying to
Philly
meet you.
barber. A Indonesian barber is where I draw the line.
Sure,
If you're
sure.
still a barber. Um, if you've gone from barbering to medical writing, yeah, feel free to reach out. Absolutely happy to talk. But like being at least connected to me in some way. So as you know, we asked 4 questions. The first one we've already answered, which is how can people reach you? And that was a question we just answered. Here's the next question I have for you. Based on what we've discussed, what would you like to ask the audience?
Oh, wow. This is a good question. Um, what would I like to ask the audience? I think I'd like to ask the audience uh, what brings them to this podcast? Like, why are they here? What are the things that they gain from showing up and listening with us today? I mean, be more fun if they could be asking those questions directly, but why are they here?
So, as you know, I try to answer that question for myself, and I seriously mean it. I find myself learning something new every single time I talk to my guests. I've had I've had CEOs like yourself on here. I've had bioethicists. I've had major government officials. I've had advertisers. You name them, I've had them on, and each person brings this unique perspective. It makes me look at the world in a different way, and I can't think of anything better to do than talk to you guys. So I appreciate you guys every single time I talk to you. So thank you. And
Well,
that's my
I
answer.
learned Iraq and
Imrad.
Iraq today.
Imrad.
Imrad today. Okay. So
Fair
I
enough.
learned something new too.
Oh,
All
I'm
the
glad.
time.
We'll make sure we have more educational sessions for you.
You know, I'm a young soul. I got plenty to learn. Bring it on.
You're a young person, not just a soul. Right. Our next question: what is something you learned in the last month outside Iraq and Imrad?
So, something I learned in the last month, I actually learned something really interesting yesterday, and I need to dig deeper. I
Okay.
had someone who talked to me about like the way that you feel when you're interacting with somebody is a mirror of how they're feeling. And I found that intriguing. Like with if you're in conflict, right? The way that where those feelings are landing on you is a mirror of the feelings they're feeling. So that's something I'll use as I interact with my teenagers. But like this idea of, and the example the person gave was if you have a toddler and the toddler has a temper tantrum and you feel helpless and frustrated, that's what the toddler's feeling. That's what's precipitating the temper tantrum. I just
I
thought that
know
was so
people who do it
intriguing.
just for the I know people who do it just for the fun of it though.
Okay, so if you're hanging out with sadists, I can't help you. But if it's just random, garden
Normal people, for
variety,
lack of a better term, would not do that to you. Fair enough.
garden variety challenges, that would be. Oh, wait, and one more thing.
Yes.
I learned that Barack Obama and Bruce Springsteen are really real life besties, and they have their own podcast, and it's kind of awesome.
Huh. Would not have known that one.
Right? It's the podcast is pretty great.
Have you
So,
been listening to it?
oh yes, yes,
I,
it's
I'm
excellent.
I have a question mostly because I'm just confused by how that happened. But did, did you watch the Netflix show from Barack Obama?
No, not yet.
Yeah, I mean, as a president, I didn't have complaints against Barack Obama, but as a Netflix show producer or maker, I have no idea what I watched. It was I was so confused. Um,
Well, you can't be great at everything.
I
I don't
guess
know.
not. No, it was just cartoons and music, and I was just
Hmm.
like, it was a good 10 minutes, and each time you kept hoping that this is like the prelude to the actual show. No, that was
Huh.
the whole thing. And you're just like, wait a second.
Oh my
So,
goodness.
so I was very confused. You can find it, and then you can, if you waste those 10 minutes, if you waste those 10 minutes of your life watching that show, um, You need to tell me what you got out of it, because I couldn't get anything out of it. This is not saying anything bad about him. I just don't share that artistic vision, and it's probably my fault. Uh, but
You're just
yeah,
able to flex that kind of right brain out there-ness. I gotcha.
no, there's someone out there who that was meant for, and that probably meant something too. I'm just not that person. Uh, but
Well, so the podcast is more about uh, the with the interesting um, thing that they shared and how they became friends is they both felt like outsiders, which is kind of mind blowing when you think about it. So it's just really interesting, and they have these sort of it's like these conversations around um, uh, things that range from fatherhood to what it was like when they were growing up and how the things they experienced when they grew as they were growing up kind of informed their thoughts on our country and racial relations and equity and these things. It's just really kind of interesting. Uh, I don't know. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. Really good
I
stuff.
love that concept because the, there's a school of thought that I battle with, which says inherently to change something you have to understand something. So that's one school of thought.
Hmm.
The second school of thought, which is, uh, have you ever watched Good Will Hunting?
Yeah, the movie,
Okay,
but
yeah,
years ago.
yeah. You remember that first scene where Matt Damon goes and solves the impossible problem? You
Hmm.
know it's actually based on a real story, right?
Yeah,
Did you know
yeah.
about this? Yeah.
I do remember
So
it was based on a real story. Yeah.
yeah, well, the story in that case was there was this student who walked into a class, saw two walked in late into a class. He saw two examples on the board, and he figured that's next week's homework, and just went solved them. And turns out they were both impossible questions to solve. But since no one told him that that's impossible, he went ahead and did it.
And
Um,
presumably a high level of genius as well. Let's face it. The rest of us might just give up.
Possibly, and I'll give you an example of why that's not necessarily true in a second.
Okay.
But it's just not knowing that it's impossible is often the part that gets you over that hump. And the reason I say that is that outsiderness of not being in the know of the impossibleness is what got him over it. You mentioned that a high level of genius. When I came to this country, so I grew up for a vast majority of my life in India. I think you knew that. And when I came here, no one told me that it's impossible to graduate community college in a year. So I did 60 credits in 1 year. Not because of anything else. I literally didn't know you couldn't do that. Uh, so I just took 20 summer, 20 fall, 20 spring, and I graduated.
Oh my goodness.
Um, but my point is, I didn't know any better.
Mm.
So sometimes just being on the other side of what is the inside, what you know, is what gets you over the hump. And I don't think I'm particularly intelligent or anything. I just think I just didn't know. So my point is, to Barack Obama or Bruce Springsteen, they've both changed the world in many, many ways. And I wonder if their outsiderness is what caused it.
I think they kind of make an argument for that their outsiderness gave them an opportunity to kind of look at things differently, create a
Yeah,
different lens.
yeah,
And then I think there was something about that lens that allowed them to have empathy,
yeah,
which I think you can't really change anything if you don't have the
yeah.
desire to, as you've said, like the desire to understand it and be empathetic toward it. So it
Which
was just interesting.
which is such an interesting comment you made there, which is if you don't have a desire to understand, you cannot cause change. And a really good example of that, I think most would agree right now, is what's happening in tech. I don't know if you heard, but both Google and Apple announced that they're closing their health divisions.
Hmm.
Um,
Really interesting.
because, yeah, well, my personal perspective is that tech came into healthcare saying we're going to change the world, never understanding what health does. What they realized is it's really hard to change health. There are reasons all those things
Oh,
are the way they are. So until you
right.
understood those problems, you can't fix those problems. And I think that fundamental, so they still are going to have components that do health, but they aren't going to go in trying to fix health the way they originally had. And I think that empathy is that distinction.
I think
There's more
I
to it.
think there's no, I think you're absolutely right. I think there's this concept of, oh, I'm going to go change this thing. And hey, outsiders can have great ideas.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
they need to make sure they understand the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think like I think about something like Apple, and it's it's a subscriber bias. I mean, you can see my Apple Watch there. Like clearly, if you want to influence me by my watch, and I download apps to help me with meditating and all these
Yeah.
other things, you've got to understand there's a subscriber bias. I've already made this decision. So
Yeah.
maybe the person that you really want to reach to change health isn't the one who's going to be wearing an Apple Watch. And it could be for a variety of reasons. It could be for they're not interested in it. It could be there's health inequities. It could be, I mean, it could be that in their community it's not it would be unwelcome or a sign of something else, a symbol of something else. So I mean, I think that's why when you hear about, oh, someone's going to come in and change this thing, they need to really make sure they understand what they're changing or trying to change. So.
I just thought this headline is interesting,
All
but
right.
it speaks to the point we're making. And then there's the last question, which is, what is something that's made you happy in the last week?
Oh, that's easy. So, uh, I think every time we talk, I share something that just seems wacky to the rest of the world, and you would think I would get embarrassed, but I don't. So the thing that made me happy in the last week is that we have we're hosting a beehive. And I had a chance to hang out with the beekeeper and learn about bees and how you care for the bees and how you find the queen and how you check for mites. It was like this wonderful enlightening hour of of my week. It was just phenomenal. Um and and I thought, there's something kind of beautiful about a beehive, and it's because it is like a single unit, like a single
Yeah.
mind in all
Yeah.
these different entities. I mean, there's a singular focus, and it's so interesting to me. These are fascinating. So that was great. Well, actually, two things. And then my son was studying for his quiz on places of the world, and um, my technique when he got something wrong was I would make him uh, I would play for him a song that would be help him remember. So like um, for example, he got Africa wrong, so
You
I
played
played
Africa, didn't you?
Weezer's Africa, and we would have a dance party with the crazy song we pick. So yeah, he's like, I promise you, I'll never get that wrong again.
Your timing is impeccable because my girlfriend and I were just having a conversation, and she'd never heard the song "Oh Carolina" from Shaggy. Have you
Huh.
heard this one?
I think I have, but maybe I
I can't play
haven't.
it because I think it might YouTube might object to it. But
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, I'll go check, but
yeah, but that's out there. So your timing is perfect. That's a really really good sort of memory for him as well. Repeating the last question, how can people reach you?
yep.
You can be found on Twitter at Robin Whitsell. You can also be found on LinkedIn at Robin Whitsell.
Mhm.
Is there any place else? Oh, and also they can actually go to your website. And what is your website
Sure.
again?
Whitsellinovations.com.
WhitselLinnovations.com. Robin, it was wonderful, wonderful, wonderful seeing you again. And I hope you'll come back again.
Of course. Thanks, Darshan.
Thank you.